Hey guys, I'm Lee Morris with Fstoppers.com. In my hand here, I have the brand new Nikon D850, and today we're going to be comparing the three most popular 24 to 70 millimeter 2.8 lenses. Nikon, Sigma, and Tamron have all recently released brand new versions of their 24 to 70 millimeter lenses. So let's get right into the comparison here. We have the brand new version with VR from Nikon. We have the Sigma Art version, and we also have the new version by Tamron as well. Let's start off this comparison with just talking about the design, and I'm only talking about the style and the way the lenses actually look. And we'll start with the Nikon. Personally, I kind of feel like these lenses are going out of style a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the gold on black, but overall, it looks like any other professional Nikon lens, and if you're a fan of that, then you're gonna love this lens. Now, looking at the Sigma and Tamron lenses, they both look very, very similar. We have both matte and glossy metal all over both of these lenses, and we also have silver accents, which I think look way better than the Nikon version. If I had to choose one of these lenses that I thought looked the best, I would have to choose the Sigma Art version. I really do think this looks the most modern. Moving on to the build quality and the way these lenses actually feel to use, again, I have to say, I think I prefer the Sigma Art lens over the build quality of the other two. Now, even though I feel like the Sigma has the best build quality, I have to say it doesn't have the best ergonomics. With the Sigma lens, to comfortably use this zoom ring, I can't really support the weight of the camera on the palm of my hand. The zoom ring is just too far away from the camera itself, and then this focus ring is too close to that. So I'm constantly bumping the zoom and focus ring at the same time, which is definitely going to cause a problem with your photographs. I'm hoping that over time this lens will loosen up a bit, but right out of the box, it is extremely tight. Moving over to the Tamron version, this is definitely the loosest zoom out of all three of the lenses, so you may actually prefer that. However, it just doesn't feel quite as nice, quite as well built as the other two lenses. Now, if you've ever used older Tamron lenses, I have to say this version is a massive jump forward. Okay, guys, you're gonna be very impressed with the build quality of the G2 version of this lens and the new 70-200. Moving on to the Nikon version, I have to say this feels very well made as well, as you would expect it to be for $2,200. But it kind of feels similar to other Nikon lenses that I've used in the past. It's not like overly impressive. It's kind of just what you would come to expect from Nikon. In terms of ergonomics, I have to say the Nikon is probably the best, simply because the zoom ring is close to the body of the camera and significantly further away from the focus ring itself, so there's no way you're going to bump that. Now let's talk about the size of each of these lenses. If I hold up the Tamron and the Sigma together, you will see that the Sigma is actually the smallest lens, and look at how much longer the Nikon version is here. It's just crazy how much longer it is. I mean, I feel like this is getting into 70-200 millimeter territory here for a 24-70. I was shocked to see how much longer this was than the previous version without VR. So if saving space in your bag is important to you, you're definitely going to want to go with the Tamron or Sigma version for that reason alone. All three of these lenses have an 82 millimeter thread size on the front, and although both the Sigma and Tamron versions appear to be much larger in diameter than the Nikon version, you can actually fit the lens hood inside of the Nikon lens hood. So believe it or not, the Nikon lens is actually longer and it's wider as well. Moving on to the buttons and switches on the side. First, we'll start with the Sigma here. It has manual focus and autofocus switches and optical stabilization on and off. These switches feel really nice. I think you can tell just how well made the lens is just by the switches alone. The Nikon switches, out of all three lenses, actually feel the worst, I would say. That being said, I've never had one of these switches fail on any of my other Nikon lenses, so I don't think you're gonna have to worry about that. And then the Tamron has similar switches as well, autofocus to manual focus and vibration compensation on and off. Again, these feel really nice, but I'd have to give the build quality to the Sigma Art once again. So let's talk about image quality with these lenses. The first test that we decided to do was a color test in the studio, and we just wanted to see if there was significant color shifting between each of these lenses. We found that the color was almost identical on all three of the lenses. However, we noticed right away that the Nikon lens was significantly more telephoto than both of these other lenses. So as you can see here, each of these shots were taken at 70 millimeters with each of the lenses. And you can tell that the Nikon lens at 70 millimeters is not really 70 millimeters. You have a little bit more zoom there. Another thing that we noticed is that the Nikon lens is allowing more light to enter the camera. So if you're shooting in low light more often, you may be interested in the Nikon for that extra 1/3 of a stop you're going to get. So then we ended up taking each of these lenses outside and we just went around taking pictures. And I've got to tell you guys, you can get almost identical looking shots with any of these lenses, all right? So you really don't have to worry about which one is a little bit sharper than the other, but we know that the internet's insane, and so we decided to go ahead and shoot a cinder block wall through the entire zoom range and through the entire f-stop range to see which lenses were sharpest in the center and the edge of each of these frames. Now, I wish I could tell you that one lens was significantly better than the others, but of course it cannot be that simple. So we'll start the test at 24 millimeters. And again, you'll notice that the Nikon lens is more zoomed in, even at 24 millimeters. So it is more telephoto throughout the entire zoom range. Now, the center of the frame on all of our test shots looked almost identical on each of these lenses, but you can really start to see some detailed differences on the edges of the frame. At 2.8, at 24 millimeters, the Sigma was significantly worse than the other two lenses. The Tamron and the Nikon were so close, maybe the Nikon was just a little bit sharper. But of course, things start to change when you start to stop down. And when we shot at f8, the shot actually looked a little bit sharper with the Tamron lens than it did with the Nikon. At 50 millimeters at 2.8, on the edge of the frame, again, the Nikon was a little bit sharper, but here the Sigma looked a little bit better than the Tamron. And things stayed consistent here at f8 as well, with Nikon being the best, Sigma being slightly worse, and maybe Tamron coming in third place. When we move to 70 millimeters, things go back to the way they were at the beginning. Nikon maybe being the best, Tamron being the second best, and then Sigma being significantly worse on the edges. At f8, Tamron wins very easily, then Nikon comes in second, and Sigma third. So if I have to boil the entire test down, I would say that maybe Nikon's a little bit better at 2.8, Tamron's a little bit better at f8, and Sigma is slightly less sharp than both of the other lenses. Now guys, keep in mind that for 99% of your photographs, you will never be able to see these differences. We are zooming into 500% on a 50 megapixel sensor. It really does not matter. Now let's move over to a VR test and see what the optical stabilization in each of these lenses is actually capable of doing. First off, we're going to test the vibration compensation on the Tamron lens. I believe the Tamron is going to be the best simply because of our test with previous Tamron lenses. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to record video here at 70 millimeters on the D850. Let's start recording. VR is off, and I'm just going to try to hold this camera steady. And you can see it's moving around a little bit. And then I'm going to flick on vibration compensation. You can see totally freezes. It's really incredible what these lenses are capable of doing. Now I'm going to flick it back off, and I'm going to shake the camera just a little bit. So you can see it's totally wrecking the frame. And while I'm shaking it, I'm going to turn on PC. I'm continuing to shake it. You can see just a little bit of shake. But man, incredible difference with this lens. All right, so now I've got the Nikon lens here. We owned the previous version of this lens without VR, but this is the first time that I've used this lens. So once again, VR is off, and I'm just going to hold the camera steady here to see how steady I can hold it by hand. And then while I'm holding it, I'm going to flick it on. You can see the Nikon lens does a great job of freezing this frame. Almost looks like I'm on a tripod. I'm going to flick it off again, and I'm going to start shaking the camera like I did last time. And I'm going to flick it back on. It's pretty interesting with this lens. The VR seems to work a little differently than the Tamron. It basically locks on really well. But if you break that lock, if you like shake it a little bit too much, then all of a sudden the VR kind of stops working completely, whereas with the Tamron, it seems to grab hold a little bit faster. But I have to say the VR in this lens is significantly better than some other VR lenses I've seen by Nikon. So I think they're doing a great job with the improvements they've made with this lens. Now I've got the Sigma version. I'm gonna turn off iOS. And again, I'm just going to try to hold it steady. And then let's flick it on. This is actually really bad. It's almost like nothing happened at all. Let me try that again. It's off right now. 3, 2, 1, on. I really think this is the worst optical stabilization I have ever seen. It's almost non-existent what it's doing. All right, let me flick it off and we'll try the shake test. So I'm gonna start vibrating the camera. And 3, 2, 1, on. It does almost nothing. It's like a 5% improvement. And off, and on, and off, and on. All right. There's really absolutely no competition when it comes to the VR on this lens. The Sigma version is almost worthless. I probably wouldn't even use it. The Nikon and the Tamron are definitely a little bit closer, but I would have to give it to the Tamron simply because it felt like with the Nikon lens, once it lost that connection with what it was trying to focus on, it would start vibrating all over the place. And I would almost have to stop vibrating the camera for it to lock on again before I could start, and then the vibration compensation would actually work. Now finally guys, let's talk about the price of each of these lenses. The Nikon version, when it came out, was $2,400, and I believe right now you can get it for $2,200. It's by far the most expensive of the three. The Sigma is the second most expensive at $1,300. I think that's a really great price for something of this build quality. And then the Tamron, believe it or not, is the most affordable at just $1,200. So this all leads into the conclusion of this review. Which of these three lenses would I recommend? For me personally, it's such an easy decision. It's very rare that the cheapest product is also the best. And although I can't say the Tamron lens is the best at every single thing, it is the best at most of the things. It is the best at f8, it is the best with vibration compensation, and it is the most affordable. For those reasons alone, I would choose the Tamron over either of these other two lenses every single day. That being said, I know a lot of people do not feel comfortable buying third-party lenses at all, and they want to stick with the Canon, Sony, or Nikon lenses, and they don't even want to test out something like a Tamron or a Sigma lens. For those of you watching this video, I would highly suggest giving these lenses a try. Both Sigma and Tamron have really stepped up their games in the last few years, and these lenses are built just as well as the Nikon versions, and in many cases, they're actually better lenses now. So that wraps up this review. Hopefully this has been a big help to you guys. For more free daily content like this, head over to fstoppers.com. And if you'd like to check out our full-length photography tutorials, head over to fstoppers.com/store.